We're back. This is episode 34. We're just having such a good time, such an awesome conversation. Again, it's just a classical case. I thought I knew about Bill, and there's just so much more below the surface, so many good stuff below the surface in a good way. And so we want to take this conversation further. And I know, Trevor, you had some ideas. Where do you want to take it? So why don't you put it up?
From our conversations the two prior to this about talking about dads, we kind of looked at it like our dads and then our view of being a dad or becoming a dad even. But in this episode, if we can look at who we are today, how does that, as a result of our dads, how has our dad influenced our life? Good, maybe not so good. And how that impacted us today and how that impacted our relationships with our wives and our children. Things that we go, oh no, I'm just like my dad and that wasn't good. Like I said, I was harsh. My dad was harsh. I'm like, oh no. But something like that. And here's what it looked like for me. Is because my dad was harsh when I was younger, I really was harsh too. Because that harshness created a sense of resentment, anger, and inferiority or insecurity. I think when our dads aren't present and engaged and can communicate love to us, there's insecurity that can breed in our hearts. And as we've discussed before in many episodes, insecurity is a bad thing because it leads to control or it leads to fear and it leads to control. And when we base relationships based out of insecurity, fear, control, relationships suffer pretty drastically. So when my dad would just blow up on me out of nowhere, I remember one situation, guys, where some friends were around and they started beating on my dad's car, like just goofing off, right, with hockey sticks because I was in Canada, hockey sticks. And I was like, I basically just acted out. I said, don't be it. And there was some kind of confrontation. My dad comes down and yells at me. Right? Doesn't even take time to find out what happened. And he's yelling at me. And I think he just struck me out of anger. And I was pissed. I was so angry. And it's funny how these little things, they stick in our head and our heart. And they carry on into our lives. And if we don't address them, they start affecting our relationships. So with my little girls, my daughters, they're adults now, but they're still my little girls. I can look back, Marek, Bill, times when I just reacted out of anger. And I said things and and I scolded them or spanked them even out of anger. I hate that. But we have to, I started identifying as men. How did our dads affect us, good and bad? Because there were certainly ways that later on, my dad affected me so much for good. But when I was younger, there's so much that carried over into my adult life that I didn't address. And I'm hoping men listening to this, as Bill and you, Marek, share a little bit of your stories with your dads, how it affected you today in relationships with a spouse or children or relatives, friends, that men will identify how their dads affected them and maybe how it has contributed to some of the brokenness in their lives. Who wants to go? Bill?
So, it's interesting I'll just kind of say it's the same story, but the opposite effect. Whereas for you, it was aggressiveness and anger. For me, it was withdrawal. So, for example, classic case is that my dad moved away from the house and he left us with my abusive grandfather. And I'm guessing that one of the main reasons he rarely came over is because he wouldn't want to deal with my grandfather. And so I think the way that affected me in my adulthood is that whenever things got tough in my relationships, I'd shut down, and I avoided those difficult conversations. Let's be honest, you cannot have a good relationship or a strong relationship, especially a romantic one, if you're avoiding difficult conversations. And so what I would do is that I didn't lash out. Sometimes I did, but very rarely. But my classical stress response to having conflict, particularly in my first marriage, was that I shut down. And so all these issues, they just got worse and worse and worse because I never addressed them, because I believe I just picked it up from my childhood home where my father withdrew, and that's how he dealt with things, and that's how I assumed to do that without even knowing it until I kind of got a higher awareness and was able to connect the dots to my childhood home.
Wow.
I just remembered some stories. Back when I was growing up, I was raised on a farm. I lived on a farm till about 8 years old. And my dad raised chickens and cows, and we had crops, and we sold milk and that kind of thing. So there were chores to do around the house. But I was the youngest of 3 boys, and the 2 older boys were usually doing chores, and I was too little. And I remember to this day, my dad, instead of encourage me, he would say, "You're too short in the poop to do that." So I grew up thinking, well, I just can't do that, you know. But if I tried, I would get in trouble. So I remember one story. It has stuck with me for years. I was probably 6, and my brothers were up working in the chicken houses. And my dad was doing something like that, and he told me, "Don't you go bother your brothers. You're going to get in the way." Well, what did I do? I wanted to go help. So I went up and I forget what I did. I don't know whether I caused any problems or not, but he caught me, and I got whipped for it.
Literally, physically.
Physically whipped for it because I did. And what I think I realize now is, rather than sit me down and talk to me,
Right.
and explain the importance of doing what he said to do and why he said it, he just reacted and whipped me.
Wow.
And so I don't know whether I learned that lesson with my kids or not, but I think as a dad, it's so important to realize they're human beings. They're little minds and hearts, and they deserve an explanation.
Yeah.
They deserve reasoning.
Yeah.
And then you punish them if they need to be punished. But they need to understand why, and they need to understand that you still love them.
Yeah.
But God allows us to go through trials, and we need to let our children go through trials too. But we need to help them understand why they're going through those trials and why they're being disciplined.
Yeah.
And so many times dads don't take the time to do that.
Yeah.
Or don't know how. Maybe we can touch on this a little bit, because I think it applies to all 3 of us. Insecurity, right? We talked about insecurity, how that affects us. Like, so watching my dad, or that lack of relationship or connection when I was younger especially, it kind of creates insecurity. Like, how do you guys feel about the idea that when our dads take time to explain to us, as Bill was saying just now, and to connect with us, even emotionally, like even to say, "I love you," like son, daughter. That really, I think, impacts the way we view ourselves. And the way we view ourselves vicariously is the way we will treat others. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a big part. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
You know, as you were saying this, I remember I went to this one retreat, and the guy said, "My dad never told me he loves me." And then it hit me. And that was only about a year ago. My dad never told me he loves me. And it seems like such a silly thing, but I was like, that must have had a tremendous impact, you know? And then kind of going back to the kind of the withdrawal, you know, for example, like this one thing that Terry Weaver says that I think is hilarious is that, you know, who's the leader? And then, you know, typically people just kind of like do the dino arm thing, you know, they just kind
they
of...
don't quite half raise.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like another reason why this connected with me is because inside of me, there was always desire to be the leader, but because I was kind of brought up in this home environment, it always second guessed myself. You know, I always kind of, you know, assumed the role of my father that, hey, I'm not strong enough. I need to kind of hide in the background. So
because if you can't eat a Polish hot dog, right? What can you do right?
Exactly. You guys remember my talk. And so that's, you know, going back to insecurity is that I was always afraid to lead. I mean, I only did it if I absolutely had to. I was always kind of hedging my bets in the back. And it's not so much because I was selfish, it's because I just didn't have that confidence within me to step out, take a step of faith and, you know, fall if I must, but at least do my best to lead from the front.
And I think a lot of that comes from the criticism that you receive when you do fail, rather than encouragement. and a little bit of correction, but encouragement to try again. If it's all criticism and you goofed up and boy, you really messed up and blah, 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 then that destroys your confidence and you don't want to try again.
And we all relate to this. Like, we all face criticism somehow by our dads, didn't we? And this is my prayer. So for Bill and I, it's a little different. Our kids, we're empty nesters now. I can't believe I'm an empty nester.
Save it for grandparents.
But this is where it's so cool for guys like Marek and maybe guys listening that have young kids, about to have kids. Criticism will kill the spirit of your children. And I am guilty of this. And I can tell you, avoid it. Any guy listening, Marek, avoid it. And thankfully, by the grace of God, I got chance for getting some things right with my kids now. But you can avoid it. And it's so much better when they're younger to not do what I did and what Bill's sharing with us. What are your guys' thoughts on that? That whole thing about how it affects us, that criticism.
There's got to be a balance. I always look for the balance in everything. Not extreme over here, not extreme over here. There's something that I know I probably failed at in raising my kids because I had a tendency, probably because I caught it from my dad, to not praise. Because I didn't want to give them a false sense of confidence. I didn't want, and why? I don't know. Maybe I feared that they would try something that they weren't able to do and get hurt. Well, that's okay.
Or even we might lose control. We might praise them too much and they won't listen to me.
So there's a danger in a fear of encouragement because you're afraid that will make them think they're better than they are. But then you've got to balance that with encouragement to help them learn who they are.
And use criticism with constructive. But not so, like my criticism never came out constructive. It was too judgmental. You know what I mean by that? And there's a difference.
You went for the jugular.
There's a difference between constructive to build somebody up for correction. Right? In a helpful way that would foster healing and growth and I didn't do that. What are your thoughts, Marek, on that?
I thought you've got to be careful as you're encouraging. Never end with the negative criticism. You did great, boy. You did great, but don't do that because all they remember is the but.
You should have told the guys this 20 years ago, Bill. I don't know.
I should have told myself that 20 years ago.
I'm going to have to work through forgiveness issues now. Marek, as a guy that wants children, and I'm believing you will, you're going to be a great dad. You're going to be an inspiration. You really are.
Thank you.
What are you getting from this? What are you hearing? And what do you think guys listening to this podcast are hearing?
I think that a key thing is that there's one thing, the intellectual understanding, but then there's execution piece. And even though I'm very blessed to be, years ahead in the intellectual understanding, I know that in the heat of the moment, you're gonna do things you're gonna regret. And I think that what's so powerful to have is to have these friendships like with you guys that, hey, I can be honest about my struggles and understand that other people are struggling with the same thing, and then we can collectively help each other out and encourage us, because it's so easy to kind of get caught up in all of your failures, and next thing you know, just kind of isolate yourself. Things like, oh man, I'm a crappy dad, that just it, and why won't I just quit while I'm not ahead?
And I think for guys listening, because this is the heart of this podcast, is how do we keep affecting men, inspiring men, whatever you want to call it, to maybe, what I say, not pay some of the stupid tax that I already paid. Because if I openly share my stupid tax, hopefully other guys can avoid the pain and the expense of the stupid tax, right? But my encouragement, I'd love to hear your guys' advice, but for the guys listening, how has your dads affected you? Whether, intentionally, unintentionally, or whatever. Maybe they were present, maybe they weren't. To really look into the heart and soul, because many of us, I think, shut off our heart when our dads basically rejected us or hurt us, crushed us, demoralized us, whatever it was. And we shut off our hearts and we don't go there because it hurts too much. It makes me feel too ugly or too unloved or not respected or smart or insecure.
Yeah.
For guys to go back to those areas of their life and just ask a simple question, how has my dad affected me?
Yeah.
Like, I remember one story, and I don't want to give it away because we're going to have him on a podcast. One of the guys at the Advance, you guys don't say his name because that'll be a different podcast. He came up after, and he says, after the Advance, he says, wow, I realized how much I tried pleasing my dad who left me and gave me for adoption. And ever since that day, I was fighting for people's approval because that rejection from my dad hurt so bad. It hurt like hell. I never wanted to be rejected again. So I based my life on having people like me. Yeah. And that young, he's younger than me anyway. I want to challenge, man, encourage, man. How has your dad affected you, and how has that now affected your relationships with your spouse and with your children?
Yeah, definitely. So please let us know. We only have a couple of minutes left, and I think that would be a good thing to finish off on a good note.
Yeah.
So why don't we just kind of go around and talk about what we learned from our dads that really appreciate.
Yeah, who wants to go first?
So I'll go first. It's like one thing about my dad is I can say what I say about him, but he had a great sense of humor. He always had a joke. He had a lot of friends because of his humor. And it's kind of, it's interesting because there's a lot of times I see something funny and my wife like really enjoys it. And I'm like, thanks, Dad. I got that from you because I got this weird mind that says these things that, I don't know, they're not like, TV comic good, but it really cracks my wife up. Just some of these impressions, or I just say something of these manners, and then she just loves it, and it just makes her day. So I definitely know that this is something I got directly from my father, and I'm eternally grateful for him because humor is such an awesome thing to do. I mean, it just goes, in the snap of a second, you go from feeling like crap to laughing about it, and it's just such an invaluable thing. So I'm forever grateful, Dad, that you gave it to me. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I think what I learned from my dad was responsibility. If you say you're going to do something, do it. He was excellent about that. He provided for the family. He went to work and worked at jobs that he did not like, but he still do it. So I've learned to do that and not flake out. He also took me hunting when I was young. And I enjoyed that. Going hunting with him was probably some of the better memories. Whether it was duck hunting or fishing or pheasant hunting with my uncle or whatever, those are good times.
Yeah.
And so I guess it speaks to, again, men, spend quality time with your kids.
Yeah.
Whether you call it a Friday night date night with your daughter or a hunting trip with your son or whatever.
Yeah.
Because those are what they'll remember.
Yeah. Amen.
Very cool. Yeah, for me it was just simply learning how to be competitive and laugh at yourself at the same time. My dad he loved competing, but I never really saw him get mad when he lost. Like never, ever. Yeah. Now it took me about 40 years to get that lesson because I only had the competitive part. I hated losing until life started kicking the crap out of me, right? But when I look back at my dad, he was always competitive and he could always laugh and enjoy even losing. It was the fun of the competition that he enjoyed. It wasn't winning or losing. And that's just something I'm learning now and really find great joy and pleasure in because of my dad.
Amen.
Well, brother,
I can't think of a better note to end that. It's kind of interesting how he smiles, and it's just a total different dynamic, and it's just a classic case. Whatever is the best or whatever is the worst is what we get from our families, from our dads. So let's do whatever we can to be the best examples, because that's what's gonna be the foundation of our kids and the people we minister to who are around us.
Beautiful, great closing. Thank you.
All right, God bless, guys, and talk to you soon.